The Vortha had been watching humans for quite some time. Their ships, sleek and almost invisible to the naked eye, hovered just outside the detection range of Earth's primitive satellites. The Vortha were not an aggressive race, quite the opposite. They prided themselves on being methodical, studious observers of other civilizations. Whenever they encountered a new species, they spent months, sometimes years, gathering data before making contact. And humans, with their strange blend of recklessness and ingenuity, had piqued their curiosity more than most. But nothing prepared them for what they witnessed next. Deep in the Kuiper Belt, the Vortha flagship, Talara, monitored a small human vessel, the Trailblazer, that had recently left Earth's orbit on an exploratory mission. The humans aboard seemed to be going about their usual business, adjusting their instruments, performing maintenance, talking and laughing with each other. Standard humanoid behavior. However, something caught the eye of Talara's lead xenobiologist, Ilnath. He squinted at his monitor, antennae twitching in disbelief. "Supervisor Threx," Ilnath called, his voice a mix of confusion and astonishment. "I believe you need to see this." Threx, the Vortha commander, floated over silently, his long, slender form illuminated by the soft glow of the control panel. His eyes narrowed as he stared at the footage displayed on the screen. At first glance, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But as the view zoomed in, he saw it. Massive, writhing creatures, coiling and undulating alongside the humans. The creatures were easily twice the length of the human ship and covered in slimy, bioluminescent skin. And yet, the humans didn't seem to be afraid. In fact, they appeared to be. Playing with them? "Are those worms?" Threx asked slowly, his usual calm demeanor cracking. "Yes, but not just any worms," Ilnath said, zooming in further. "These are space worms, Gargathians to be precise, extremely dangerous, highly territorial creatures that inhabit asteroid fields across the galaxy. No known species has successfully tamed them. They're considered a universal threat." Threx's brow furrowed. "Yet these humans, they seem to be interacting with them? Peacefully?" Ilnath nodded. "More than that, sir. They appear to be treating them like companions, pets even." There was a long pause as both Vortha tried to process the absurdity of the situation. On every world the Vortha had studied, these creatures were feared, avoided at all costs. And yet, here were these humans, one of the youngest species the Vortha had encountered, casually tossing what appeared to be a large metal disc for one of the worms to catch in its gaping maw. The worm spun happily, its colossal body shimmering with excitement as it returned the disc to its human handler. This cannot be real," Threx muttered, rubbing the ridge of his head as if trying to dispel the vision before him. But it was all too real. "What should we do?" Ilnath asked, still baffled. Threx stared at the screen, watching as one human casually patted the slimy head of a space worm as if it were a common house pet. "We need to investigate further," Threx finally said, his voice tinged with unease. "There's something here we don't understand, and it might be more important than we realize." The Vortha were logical beings. They didn't jump to conclusions without evidence. But what they were seeing now defied every bit of logic they had known. Could the humans possess some hidden power? A telepathic connection? Some advanced technology that allowed them to control such creatures? Or, more disturbingly, was their relationship with these gargantuan beasts more than mere mastery? Could the humans be in league with these ancient predators? One thing was certain. The Vortha's understanding of humanity had just become infinitely more complicated. As Threx issued orders to begin a detailed analysis of the Trailblazer and its peculiar crew, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far stranger than he could have ever anticipated. Aboard the Trailblazer, Captain Boyd McAllister leaned back in his command chair, feet propped up on the console, while a massive space worm affectionately nudged his leg. The creature, which they had named Squishy for obvious reasons, curled its enormous gelatinous body around the captain's chair like a loyal dog. "All right, Squishy, don't get too clingy now. I've got work to do," Boyd muttered with a grin, gently pushing the worm's head away. Squishy responded with a low, almost purring hum as its iridescent skin pulsed in a soft blue glow. "Captain, the Vortha are still hovering just outside the system. You think they're scared of us or what?" said his first officer, Lieutenant Kara Dunn, while absent-mindedly scratching the chin of her own space worm, a slightly smaller one named Wiggly. Wiggly's head tilted in pure bliss, its tentacle-like appendages flopping lazily as it enjoyed the attention. Boyd chuckled. Probably both. They've been spying on us for a week now, haven't made a move. You'd think we were some kind of galactic superpower with how cautious they are. He flicked a switch on the console, bringing up a live feed of the Vortha's ship, barely visible in the distance. But let's be real, they're watching the worms. Can't blame them. Kara smirked. Yeah, I suppose it's not every day you see people tossing a frisbee to a 30-foot space slug. Behind them, other crew members went about their business, each with a worm companion of their own. There was Dr. Avery Cole, the ship's xenobiologist, who had formed a near-obsessive attachment to her worm, Gloop. She had even taken to teaching it tricks, simple things like rolling over or playing fetch with chunks of asteroid. The fact that Gloop was big enough to accidentally crush a car didn't seem to faze her. Then there was Chief Engineer Malik Diaz, who swore that his worm, Slimy, had a knack for finding weak spots in the ship's energy conduits, as if it could sense the electrical current. Maybe the Vorth are just jealous, Diaz said, walking into the bridge with a smirk. I mean, they're all high-tech, but I don't see them riding around with giant space worms. Boyd gave a snort of laughter. You kidding me? They probably think we're completely insane. Kara laughed as she ruffled Wiggly's head. Well, maybe we are, but hey, it works. Nothing like a little worm therapy to keep the stress levels down, right? It was true. For all their size and alien appearance, the space worms had become an integral part of the Trailblazers' crew dynamics. It had all started months ago when the crew stumbled upon an asteroid field teeming with the creatures. At first, there was panic. Space worms were notoriously dangerous. But as it turned out, these particular worms were much more docile than their reputation suggested. And somehow, in the chaos of those early days, a bond had formed. Boyd liked to joke that it was the weirdest case of Stockholm Syndrome in galactic history. The worms seemed to enjoy human company, and the humans, well, they found that having a massive, nearly indestructible space beast around wasn't such a bad thing after all. Still, not everyone in the galaxy would understand. Most species ran in the opposite direction at the mere mention of Gargathians. These were the kinds of creatures that destroyed starships, devoured entire mineral-rich asteroids, and left behind only wreckage. But here, on the Trailblazer, they were just part of the crew. Boyd looked out the viewport, watching Squishy lazily float in the zero-gravity zone near the ceiling. It was still surreal, even after months of this. You ever think about how crazy this would look to anyone else? Like, imagine explaining this back on Earth. Kara grinned. Oh, I'm sure the folks back home will love hearing about how we turned the galaxy's most feared predators into cuddle buddies. Dr. Cole entered the bridge just in time to overhear. It's not that crazy if you think about it scientifically, she said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Space worms evolved to thrive in the vacuum of space. They're highly intelligent and have complex social structures. It's no wonder they've bonded with us. We've just tapped into a side of them that no one else bothered to discover. Boyd raised an eyebrow. Uh-huh. Or maybe they just like the way we scratch their heads. Cole shot him a look, but her smile never faded. Laugh all you want, Captain, but these creatures are amazing. We've barely scratched the surface of what they can do. I bet they're capable of even more. Diaz leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Well, they'd better not be capable of eating through my engine room. I'm still finding slime trails in places I didn't think were physically possible. As the crew shared a round of laughter, Boyd's attention drifted back to the Vortha ship on the monitor. You think they're ever going to make a move? Kara shrugged. Maybe they're waiting for the right moment. Or maybe they're still trying to figure out why we haven't been eaten yet. Boyd smirked. If only they knew. Humans are tougher to chew on than we look. Diaz chuckled. That, and we keep the worms well fed with space junk. The lighthearted atmosphere continued as Squishy slowly curled itself into a ball near the captain's chair, its massive body taking up a good portion of the bridge. Boyd reached down to pat its squishy head. You know, he said thoughtfully, maybe we are crazy, but I'd take crazy over boring any day. Just then, the comms panel blinked to life. The Vortha had sent a message. Finally, the crew's laughter died down as Boyd pressed the button to open the channel. "Captain McAllister," came the voice of Threx, the Vortha commander, slow and deliberate. "We wish to request a meeting. It is of the utmost importance." Boyd exchanged a glance with Kara, who just shrugged. "Guess they've had enough of watching," she said. Boyd leaned forward with a grin, flipping the comm switch. "Sure thing, Commander Threx. We'll roll out the welcome mat. Just don't mind the worms." As the channel closed, Boyd chuckled to himself. Whatever the Vortha were expecting, it was clear they had no idea what they were walking into. Inside the Vortha flagship, Halara, Commander Threx paced back and forth in his quarters, antennae twitching with barely contained anxiety. He had never encountered anything like this in his decades of service. It wasn't the humans that unnerved him. They were still a mystery, of course, but mysteries could be unraveled. No, it was the space worms that defied every known protocol, every scientific explanation. He stared at the latest footage from their surveillance feed. The humans were clearly interacting with the gargantuan creatures with a baffling level of familiarity. One human even fed what appeared to be a glowing piece of space debris to one of the worms, which obediently swallowed it and emitted what looked like... Was that a happy glow? "It's undeniable," Threx muttered to himself, rubbing his ridged brow. "The humans have tamed them." The word felt alien in his mouth, absurd even, but the evidence was irrefutable. And if the humans possessed the ability to control creatures as formidable as Gargathians, they were far more dangerous and potentially more valuable than the Vortha had ever imagined. Ilnath, the ship's lead xenobiologist, entered the room, his own demeanor unusually shaken. "Commander," he said quietly, "we've analyzed all the data. We still don't know how they're doing it, but there's no denying it. The humans have some form of mastery over these creatures. The implications are staggering." Threx nodded gravely. "Have you ruled out the possibility of advanced technology or telepathic control?" Ilnath shook his head. "We've found no evidence of any artificial enhancements or implants in the worms. If the humans are using some form of mind control, it's beyond anything we've ever seen before." Threx's mind raced. If the humans could control beings like the Gargathians, what else were they capable of? Was this the reason for their rapid expansion into space? Were they using these creatures as a kind of biological weapon, bending them to their will? It seemed implausible, but the Vortha had learned long ago that underestimating a species could lead to disastrous consequences. "Commander," Ilnath continued, "it's clear that we must proceed with caution. We don't know the full extent of the humans' capabilities, and we certainly don't know what they want. But one thing is certain. Those creatures aren't ordinary animals. They're much more than that." Threx stopped pacing and turned to face Ilnath. "We must understand their secret, Ilnath. If the humans have unlocked some hidden power, we need to know how. And we need to know what role these creatures play in their plans. Our best option is to observe them up close." Ilnath's eyes widened. "You want to board their vessel? Commander, that could be dangerous. What if the humans use the worms to..." Threx raised a hand, silencing him. "I've already sent a message requesting a diplomatic meeting. If we want answers, we need to engage directly. We cannot afford to wait any longer. The Council is expecting results, and I won't return empty-handed." Ilnath hesitated. "What if they perceive our interest in the worms as aggressive? They might see us as a threat." Threx narrowed his eyes. "We must tread carefully. We'll approach them with diplomacy, but we cannot appear weak. Make sure the team is ready. We're going to meet these humans face to face and discover the truth about their relationship with the Gargathians." Aboard the Trailblazer, the crew was busy preparing for the Vortha delegation. Captain Boyd McAllister had set up the meeting area in the cargo bay, which had been hastily cleared of space junk, and more importantly, of worms. Boyd figured that the Vortha would be nervous enough without seeing a dozen space worms slithering around the negotiation table. Still, that didn't stop Wiggly from sticking its head through the doorway, curious about the new arrivals. "Wiggly, no," Kara whispered, gently pushing the worm's glowing snout back through the door. "They're not ready for you yet." As the Vortha shuttle approached, Boyd stood with his arms crossed, trying to look serious despite the absurdity of the situation. "So what's your bet, Kara?" he asked, glancing at his first officer. You think they're here to ask for tips on worm care, or are they just completely freaked out? Kara smirked. Honestly, I'm thinking they're more scared of Squishy than they are of us. Boyd chuckled. Yeah, probably. But let's not forget, they're an advanced species. Who knows what they're thinking? As the Vortha shuttle docked and the doors hissed open, Boyd straightened up, adopting his best, professional captain posture. Threx and Ilnoth emerged, their tall, slender forms casting long shadows as they stepped into the cargo bay. Their large, multifaceted eyes blinked slowly as they took in their surroundings. They were clearly trying to remain composed, but there was no mistaking the way their gaze flickered anxiously toward the far side of the bay, where the crew's space worms were safely secured behind a containment field. Welcome aboard the Trailblazer, Boyd said, stepping forward with a grin. I'm Captain McAllister. I believe you've been watching us for a while. Threx inclined his head slightly. Captain McAllister, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. We have much to discuss. Boyd gestured toward the table, where a spread of food and drink had been laid out, a friendly gesture, though it was doubtful the Vortha would partake. Please, have a seat. We're happy to answer any questions you have. Threx and Ilnoth sat cautiously, their long limbs folding gracefully as they positioned themselves at the table. Boyd and Kara sat across from them, while the rest of the crew hung back, trying not to crowd the visitors. Threx's eyes lingered on the worms, now quietly coiled in the containment field, their glowing bodies pulsing gently. We have observed your interactions with these creatures, Threx began, his voice slow and deliberate. They are unlike anything we have ever seen. Boyd glanced at Kara, who raised an eyebrow in amusement. Yeah, there's something. All right, Boyd said, trying to sound casual. But they're just pets, really. Harmless, well, mostly harmless. Threx's antennae twitched. You keep them as pets? Boyd nodded, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Sure. I mean, they're big, yeah, but they're pretty docile once you get to know them. Smart, too. We've had them around for a while now. Ilnoth leaned forward, his voice quivering with barely concealed awe. And you control them? With no technology? No enhancements? How is that possible? Kara stifled a laugh, but Boyd remained calm. Control? Nah, nothing like that. They just seem to like us, I guess. Give them a snack, scratch their heads, and they're as happy as can be. Ilnoth's eyes widened in shock. You mean to say they have bonded with you naturally? Without coercion? Boyd scratched his chin, trying to understand what the big deal was. Yeah, that's about the size of it. Threx's expression darkened, and for the first time, Boyd saw something that looked like fear flicker in his alien eyes. Captain McAllister, Threx said slowly, you must understand. The creatures you call space worms are known throughout the galaxy as highly dangerous and untamable. No species has ever formed a bond with them until now. Boyd frowned. Wait, what? You're telling me these guys are supposed to be deadly? Threx nodded gravely. Yes, they are considered apex predators on many worlds, feared and avoided by all. The fact that your species has managed to not only survive in their presence but to tame them, this is unprecedented. There was a brief silence as Boyd processed this. He exchanged glances with Kara, who was clearly holding back a laugh. Well, guess we got lucky, huh? Boyd said, trying to keep his tone light. But Threx wasn't laughing. He leaned in closer, his voice low and intense. Captain, I do not believe this is luck. There is something more at work here, and we intend to find out what it is. Back on the Trailblazer, the tension in the air was palpable. Captain Boyd McAllister sat in stunned silence, trying to wrap his head around what the Vortha had just said. The fact that Squishy, Wiggly, and the rest of their slimy crew were considered galactic-level apex predators made his head spin. Here they were, casually tossing treats to creatures that could apparently decimate entire planetary ecosystems. Well, that's, something, Boyd finally said, scratching the back of his head. He glanced over at Kara, who had the same bewildered look on her face. The rest of the crew stood around awkwardly, unsure of how to respond. Kara cleared her throat, trying to ease the tension. So let me get this straight. We're the only ones who've ever managed to make friends with these guys? And everyone else is just running away? Ilnoth, the Vortha xenobiologist, nodded fervently. Precisely. For centuries, Gargathians have been regarded as a menace, a force of nature that could not be reasoned with. And yet, here you are, interacting with them as if they were mere domesticated animals. His voice trembled with awe, his wide eyes fixed on Wiggly, who was now snaking its way across the cargo bay floor, blissfully unaware of the intense scrutiny it was under. Threx, however, remained quiet. His antennae twitched occasionally, his gaze fixed on Squishy, who had stretched out lazily in the containment field. The silence stretched on until Threx spoke in a low, serious tone. "You do not understand the significance of this. If what you say is true, and you have formed these bonds without the use of advanced technology, then this changes everything. The Council will have to reevaluate their stance on your species. You are more dangerous than we thought." Boyd raised an eyebrow, unable to suppress a smirk. "Dangerous, us? Look, Commander, I think there's been a bit of a misunderstanding. We're not using these guys as weapons or anything. They're just friendly." He shrugged, gesturing to Squishy, who rolled over lazily, emitting a soft, contented glow. "They're like overgrown puppies." Threx's expression darkened, clearly unconvinced. "No creature of that magnitude is just friendly. There must be more to it. You possess something, perhaps a pheromonal signal or a latent psychic ability that allows you to control them." Boyd blinked. "Psychic abilities? Pheromones? No. You've got it all wrong. We didn't even know these worms were dangerous until you told us just now. They just kind of liked us from the start." Kara chuckled softly. "You should have seen the first time one of these guys tried to snuggle up to the ship. We thought we were under attack, and then Squishy here started doing this weird rolling thing. Turns out, he just wanted a belly rub." Ilnath's jaw dropped, and he scribbled furiously on his datapad. Belly rub." Kara nodded, her voice filled with amusement. "Yeah, they're surprisingly cuddly for something that could apparently destroy a starship." Boyd watched as Threx processed this information, clearly struggling to reconcile the Vortha's understanding of these creatures with what he was seeing now. The idea that humans could just casually befriend something so fearsome didn't seem to compute. Then, without warning, Squishy uncurled itself and slithered towards the containment field's edge, making a low, happy hum. Boyd followed its gaze and saw what had caught the worm's attention, a large metal disc that had rolled off the nearby equipment pile. Squishy's favorite toy. "Oh no, here we go again," Boyd muttered under his breath, but it was too late. Before anyone could stop it, Squishy reached through the containment field with a surprising amount of dexterity for something so massive and slimy, grabbed the disc, and tossed it towards Boyd with an enthusiastic whoosh. The disc whizzed past Boyd's head and clanged loudly against the wall behind him, narrowly missing the stunned Vortha delegation. Sorry about that," Boyd said sheepishly. "Squishy's got a good arm. Tentacle." Ilnath's eyes were practically bulging out of his head, his datapad trembling in his hands. "It's playing with you," he whispered in disbelief. Threx, however, was not amused. His eyes narrowed, and he rose to his full height, his long limbs casting a shadow over the room. "This is not a game, Captain McAllister," he said, his voice cold and serious. "You are dealing with forces you clearly do not comprehend. The bond you share with these creatures may seem harmless to you, but it poses a threat to the balance of the galaxy." Boyd's easygoing demeanor faltered. "A threat? Look, Commander, with all due respect, we're not out here trying to upset any balance. We're just exploring, making friends, sometimes the slimy, wormy kind. If anything, you're the ones making this into something it's not." Threx leaned in closer, his voice a low growl. "You may not realize it yet, but your species has stumbled upon something dangerous. Creatures like these do not form bonds lightly. They choose only those they deem worthy. And if they have chosen you, Captain McAllister, that makes you far more powerful and far more dangerous than you realize." Boyd opened his mouth to protest, but before he could say anything, a sudden crash echoed through the cargo bay. Everyone turned just in time to see Wiggly, in a fit of excitement, knock over a stack of equipment crates. The crates tumbled down with a deafening clatter, sending tools and spare parts scattering across the floor. "Oh, for crying out loud, Wiggly!" Kara shouted, rushing over to calm the overly enthusiastic worm. Ilnath looked on, his face a mix of shock and awe. This is unprecedented," he muttered, half to himself. "They obey you, but they are not subservient. They retain their autonomy, yet they choose to stay with you. Incredible. Boyd sighed and rubbed his temples. I don't think they obey us so much as they just like hanging around. Honestly, I'm not even sure who's in charge here. Threx, still visibly unnerved, took a step back from the chaos. Captain, we will need to report this to the Council immediately. There are greater forces at play here than you understand. Boyd folded his arms, his patience wearing thin. Look, Commander, I get that this is weird for you, but for us, this is just Tuesday. So, whatever big galactic threat you think we've unleashed by tossing a frisbee to a space worm, maybe just chill out for a second. Threx glared at him, clearly unamused. You humans are far too cavalier about the unknown. That will be your undoing. Before Boyd could respond, Squishy, still eager to play, grabbed the metal disc again and lobbed it toward Threx with shocking precision. The Vortha commander barely had time to react as the disc flew past his head, clipping his antennae. What is this? Threx barked, his composure finally cracking. Does this creature mock me? Boyd stifled a laugh, while Kara, who had just returned with Wiggly, couldn't hold hers back. Looks like Squishy's trying to make friends, Commander, she said between fits of giggling. Threx's face flushed a dark shade of violet, clearly offended. I have had enough of this. We will report back to the Council. And mark my words, Captain, this will not be the last you hear of this. With that, Threx and Ilnath stormed out of the cargo bay, leaving Boyd, Kara, and the rest of the crew standing there, watching as the Vortha shuttle disengaged and sped away. Boyd sighed and looked down at Squishy, who was now happily tossing the disc in the air, oblivious to the chaos it had caused. Well, I think it's safe to say that didn't go as planned. Kara grinned. Yeah, but it sure was fun to watch. Boyd shook his head, still chuckling. Fun, sure, but I've got a feeling the Vortha aren't going to let this go anytime soon. He glanced at Squishy, who seemed completely unaware of the diplomatic disaster it had just unleashed. Then again, Boyd said with a smirk, maybe they'll come around. Who could stay mad at this face? The next few days aboard the Trailblazer passed uneventfully, at least by human standards. Squishy, Wiggly, and the rest of the worm crew went about their usual routines of floating lazily through the ship and causing minor chaos, knocking over supplies, dripping slime on important equipment, and generally acting like overgrown gelatinous puppies. Boyd McAllister and his crew had gotten used to it. But the Vortha? That was another story. Threx had made it clear in his final words. The humans' relationship with the space worms was not something they were going to ignore. And sure enough, just 3 days after the rather disastrous meeting, the Vortha delegation returned. Boyd was standing on the bridge, looking out at the stars, when the comms system crackled to life. Captain McAllister, came Threx's deep, measured voice. The Council has reached a decision. We are returning to your vessel for further discussions. Boyd raised an eyebrow. Oh great, more fun with the Vortha, he muttered, then tapped the comms panel. We'll be ready for you, Commander Threx. Just remember, no sudden moves around the worms. They tend to get excited. He ended the transmission and turned to Kara, who was lounging in the captain's chair, tossing a small piece of metal for Wiggly to chase. Think they're going to try and take Squishy this time? She asked with a smirk. Boyd chuckled. Wouldn't put it past them. They're still convinced we're hiding some kind of ultimate worm power or something. Like we've got the keys to a galactic superweapon just hanging out in our cargo bay. Kara shrugged, leaning forward to catch Wiggly as it nuzzled up to her. Well, we better make sure they don't leave with one of our pets. No way, I'm letting them take this guy. When the Vortha shuttle docked again, Threx and Ilnath walked into the cargo bay with an air of cautious determination. This time, though, they brought reinforcements. 3 more Vortha scientists, all carrying complex-looking scanning equipment and data recorders. It was clear they weren't just here for a chat. Boyd stood at the far end of the bay, arms crossed, watching them approach. Commander Threx, Ilnath, good to see you again, he said with an overly friendly smile. I see you've brought some extra hands. We throwing a party? Threx, as always, was not amused. Captain McAllister, this is no time for frivolity. The Council has authorized us to conduct a full investigation into your unique relationship with the Gargathians. Boyd glanced at Kara, who raised an eyebrow in mock surprise. Investigation, huh? Well, as long as it doesn't involve probing us, I guess you're welcome to take a look. Threx gave a sharp nod and motioned to his scientists. They immediately began setting up their equipment, scanning the worms, analyzing their bioluminescent skin, their movements, and even their strange hums. The Vortha took it all very seriously, despite the fact that Squishy seemed more interested in chasing his metal disc than in cooperating with their investigation. One of the Vortha scientists crouched down in front of Squishy, holding up a scanner and making a series of strange, clicking noises. Squishy, ever the playful one, responded by launching a glob of slime directly at the scientist's face. "Oh, not again," Boyd muttered, watching the poor Vortha freeze in shock as the thick, glowing goo slid down his visor. Threx's eyes narrowed, but he kept his composure. "As I said before, Captain, these creatures are far from pets. They are apex predators, and the bond you share with them, whether through psychic influence or some form of unknown pheromone, poses a significant threat to galactic stability." Boyd raised an eyebrow. "Galactic stability? You really think Squishy here is going to bring down civilization as we know it?" Threx's expression remained cold. "We have studied the Gargathians for centuries, Captain. They are violent, unpredictable, and capable of destruction on a massive scale. For your species to have tamed them suggests that you possess a power we do not fully understand. If that power were to fall into the wrong hands," Boyd blinked. "Wrong hands? Commander, we're not even trying to control these things. We feed them, give them some head scratches, and they just hang out. If there's some big cosmic secret we've unlocked, it's news to us." But Threx wasn't listening. His eyes had locked onto something behind Boyd. The captain turned to see what had caught the alien's attention and groaned. Oh, come on. Squishy had found his favorite toy again and had decided, for whatever reason, that Ilnath should be his new playmate. The massive worm slithered forward, the metal disc in its mouth, and gently nudged the Vortha scientist, letting out an enthusiastic hum. Ilnath, still wiping slime from his face, stood frozen in place, clearly unsure of how to respond. Squishy nudged him again, this time more insistently. Ilnath? Might want to toss the disc," Boyd called out, barely holding back a laugh. Ilnath blinked, clearly bewildered. "Toss the disc?" Kara couldn't hold it in any longer and burst into laughter. "Yeah, just throw it. Trust me, he'll love it." Ilnath, still looking utterly lost, hesitantly took the disc from Squishy's mouth and gave it a weak toss. Squishy immediately darted, slithered after it, catching it in midair with surprising agility for something so large and, slimy. The Vortha scientists stared, their expressions a mix of confusion, fascination, and sheer disbelief. It was as if everything they knew about the galaxy's most feared predator was crumbling before their eyes. "You see?" Boyd said, clapping Threx on the shoulder in a way that probably crossed several cultural boundaries. "They just want to play. There's no grand conspiracy here, no secret weapon. Just a bunch of overgrown space worms who figured out we're fun to be around." Threx shrugged Boyd's hand off, his antennae twitching in frustration. "You still fail to comprehend the gravity of the situation, Captain. The fact remains, your species has accomplished something no other has. You have formed a bond with these creatures, and that bond gives you an unimaginable advantage." Boyd sighed. "Look, Commander, I get it. This is weird. Believe me, we know. But there's no advantage here. We didn't plan for this. We didn't do anything special. These guys just showed up one day, and now they're part of the crew. It's not some intergalactic power play." Threx stared at him, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "We will see, Captain. The Council will decide what to do with this information. For now, we will take our leave." Boyd raised his hands in mock surrender. "Fine by me. Just don't forget to grab your disc on the way out." Threx turned on his heel and marched toward the shuttle, his entourage of slime-covered scientists trailing behind. As the Vortha shuttle departed, Boyd let out a long breath, watching the ship disappear into the blackness of space. Kara walked up beside him, still chuckling. "Think they'll ever figure it out?" Boyd shook his head, a grin spreading across his face. "Not a chance. Let them try, though. They'll be out there scanning worms for the next 100 years. He glanced down at Squishy, who had returned to his usual spot next to the captain's chair, contentedly chewing on his disc. "Who knows, maybe we really did stumble onto something big. But if we did, I think we're the last ones who'll understand it, Kara smirked. Well, until then, we've got the galaxy's weirdest pets to keep us company. Boyd smiled, patting Squishy on the head. And if anyone asks, we'll just tell them the truth. Sometimes the scariest monsters are just looking for a little fun. And with that, the Trailblazer continued its journey through the stars, Squishy and all.